Most systems don't crash when they break. They fail long before anyone notices. The building never slowed down, not even for a second. 42 floors of glass and steel humming like a perfectly tuned engine, every screen glowing, every department moving in rhythm as if nothing in the world could touch it. Orders processed in milliseconds. Data streams flowing clean. Numbers climbing exactly the way they were supposed to. From the outside, it looked flawless. Inside, it felt the same. No alarms. No warnings. Just quiet confidence built on dashboards that said everything was fine. Marcus Hale stood just past the security gate, a canvas delivery bag hanging from his shoulder, the faint scent of coffee clinging to his jacket. No badge. No title. Just another man passing through a space that wasn't built for him. He paused for half a second longer than most would. Not enough to draw attention. Just enough to notice. His eyes didn't move like the others. They didn't scan for directions or exits. They settled. On a screen mounted high above the reception desk, lines of system activity flickered past in neat columns, too fast for most to read, too clean for anyone to question. But something in the rhythm felt off. Not loud, not obvious, just uneven, like a heartbeat that skipped once every few seconds. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, as if adjusting the strap on his shoulder, but his gaze stayed locked for one more breath. A loop, running twice, then correcting itself, then repeating again. No one reacted. Not the engineers walking by with their pressed shirts and quiet urgency. Not the receptionist tapping her tablet with practiced precision. Not even the managers glancing at their phones as if the entire system existed only to serve them, not to be questioned. Marcus looked away first. That was the habit. Notice. Understand. Move on. He stepped forward, placed the delivery on the counter, and gave a small nod. No extra words. No attempt to belong. Just enough presence to complete the task. But as he turned to leave, his fingers brushed the edge of the console near the wall. A subtle motion. Almost accidental. One tap. One adjustment. A tiny correction buried. Deep where no one would think to look. He didn't wait to see the result. Didn't watch the screen. Didn't check for confirmation. He just walked. Past the polished floors. Past the glass doors. Back into the noise of the city where people moved faster but saw less. Behind him, the system kept running. Smooth. Efficient. Invisible. Whatever had been there before wasn't anymore. And no one inside that building. Not the engineers, not the executives, not even the CEO sitting 3 floors above reviewing her morning reports, had any idea that something had just been fixed. Because as far as they could tell, nothing had ever been broken. Upstairs, 3 floors above the lobby, Evelyn Carter did not look at screens the way most people did. She did not skim. She did not glance. She studied. Her office was quiet, insulated from the noise below by glass walls and soft carpeting that absorbed footsteps before they could echo. The city stretched out behind her in long lines of traffic and distant movement, but inside, everything was controlled. Precise. Predictable. She stood at her desk, tablet in hand, reviewing the morning system reports that had already been filtered, summarized, and approved before they ever reached her. Clean numbers. Stable performance. No alerts. That was what she expected. That was what she built her company on. Consistency. But something in the report made her pause. It was not a spike. Not a drop. Not even an error. Just a small absence where something should have been. A pattern that usually appeared every morning was gone. A minor inefficiency that her engineers had flagged weeks ago. Something they said was harmless. Something they had scheduled to address later. It was not there anymore. Evelyn tapped the screen once, then again, pulling up deeper layers of data. The system logs unfolded in neat sequences. Every action recorded. Every adjustment documented. Except this one. Her brow tightened slightly. Not frustration. Not yet. Just focus sharpening into something more exact. She moved to her main console, fingers gliding across the surface as she opened the raw system feed. Lines of code scrolled upward in silent precision. No noise. No. Irregular spikes. Just cleaner than before. She leaned in just a fraction. That was when she saw it. A single change. Small enough to disappear if you were not looking for it. But it was there. A loop restructured. A redundancy removed. A correction placed exactly where it needed to be, as if someone had understood the entire architecture and then decided to touch only the part that mattered. Evelyn straightened slowly. No authorization tag. No engineer signature. No scheduled update tied to it. Her team did not make changes without documentation. That was the rule. That was her rule. She pressed a button on her desk. The line connected instantly. Who touched the core processing loop this morning? Her voice was calm, level, the kind of calm that made people listen carefully before answering. There was a pause on the other end. Then a reply. Confused. Careful. No one, ma'am. There were no updates scheduled. Evelyn did not respond right away. Her eyes stayed on the screen, on that one line that did not belong to anyone. Check again, she said quietly. The call ended. The office returned to silence. She set the tablet down, but her attention did not leave the system. It felt different now. Not louder, not faster, just steadier, as if something unstable had been corrected before it had the chance to become visible. Evelyn walked toward the window, her reflection faint against the glass. For a moment, she looked out at the city, then back at the screen behind her. She had built a company where nothing happened without being seen, without being measured, without being claimed. And yet something had, something precise, something intentional, something quiet. Down on the street, far below, Marcus blended into the movement of people heading in every direction. No one looked at him twice. No one needed to. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder and kept walking, already thinking about the next stop, the next hour, the next responsibility waiting for him at home. Behind him, in a building of perfect systems and perfect control, a question had just been born. And for the first time that morning, Evelyn Carter was no longer looking at what worked. She was trying to understand what she had almost missed. By mid-morning, the engineers had gathered in a glass-walled conference room that felt more like a display case than a workspace. Every movement visible, every hesitation exposed under the soft white lighting. And yet no one spoke louder than necessary, because uncertainty had a way of lowering voices even in a company built on confidence. One of them scrolling through logs, another cross-checking timestamps, each expecting to find a simple explanation that would restore order to what they understood. But the deeper they looked, the quieter the room became, because the change was not just present, it was precise, too precise to be accidental, too restrained to be careless. It did not rewrite the system. It respected it, adjusted it, corrected it in a way that suggested whoever made it understood not just the code, but the intention behind it. And that was what unsettled them most. Could it be an automated patch? Someone finally asked, not fully believing the question even as it left his mouth. Another shook his head slowly. No signature, no trace, nothing in the deployment schedule. Fingers paused over keyboards as if the system itself might respond if they waited long enough. But it did not. It just kept running, smooth and indifferent, as if it had always been this way. Upstairs, Evelyn stood just outside the room for a moment before entering. Not rushing, not announcing herself, just observing through the glass as her team searched for answers that were already beginning to slip beyond their reach. She stepped inside and the room shifted instantly. Chairs straightened, voices tightened. "Walk me through it," she said. And they did, carefully, methodically, pointing out what had changed, what had disappeared, what no longer behaved the way it used to. And when they finished, there was a brief silence that lingered longer than expected. Evelyn's eyes moved from one screen to another, not reacting, just absorbing. "So the system is more efficient now," she said. One engineer nodded, hesitant. "Yes, ma'am. About 20% reduction in redundant processing." She held that number in her mind for a second, not impressed, not satisfied, just aware. "And none of you made this change." Another pause, then a quiet chorus of no. She turned slightly, looking at the main display again. That single line still there, still anonymous. Then someone else did. No one answered that, because the idea did not fit into the structure they trusted. Systems had owners, changes had origins, everything was accounted for. That was how they kept control. And yet control, in this moment, felt incomplete. Evelyn walked to the head of the table, resting her hand lightly against the surface. "Trace every access point from the last 12 hours, she said. "I want every entry, every badge, every external interaction." Her tone did not rise. It did not need to. They moved immediately, commands issued, screens shifting, the room filling with quiet urgency. But even as they worked, something had already shifted in Evelyn's mind. Because this was not just about finding a person, it was about understanding a decision, Why someone would see a flaw before it mattered, fix it without recognition, and leave without a trace. That was not how people in her world operated. Not here, not at this level. Across the city, Marcus stepped off a bus and walked the remaining 2 blocks to a modest apartment building where the paint had faded unevenly over the years. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. Familiar, grounding. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Setting his bag down quietly, a small voice called from the other room. "Daddy, you are home early." He smiled without thinking. "Just on time," he replied. Moving toward the kitchen where a half-finished homework sheet lay beside a glass of milk, he glanced at it, then back at her. "Math again?" She nodded. A little frustrated, he pulled out a chair and sat beside her, not rushing, not correcting immediately, just looking at the problem with her, patient, steady. The same way he had looked at the system earlier, not forcing answers, just understanding what was there before changing anything. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside the building downtown, questions multiplied, and between those 2 spaces, unnoticed by almost everyone, the same quiet pattern existed, someone who saw what others missed and chose to fix it without needing to be seen. That night, the building did not sleep. It only dimmed, lights lowering in certain floors while others stayed alive with quiet motion, servers humming behind sealed doors, screens still updating in soft pulses of light. And somewhere deep within that system, the change held steady, invisible, stable, doing exactly what it was meant to do without drawing attention to itself. Evelyn remained in her office long after most had left, her heels resting beside her chair, posture relaxed but her focus sharper than it had been all day. The reports had been rechecked, the access logs pulled, every badge scanned and accounted for, delivery entries, maintenance visits, scheduled vendors, all listed in precise order, and yet none of them explained the change. Not clearly, not convincingly. She leaned back slightly, eyes tracing the timeline again, not looking for errors now, but for patterns, something human, something intentional. Because this was not random, it could not be, the system did not correct itself like that, not with restraint, not with understanding. She tapped one entry lightly, a delivery window from earlier that morning, short, routine, nothing unusual, but it overlapped exactly with the moment the change appeared. Her fingers stilled, not jumping to conclusions, just holding the detail in place. She opened the building camera feed, not rushing, just selecting the lobby view and letting it play back in real time at first, then slower, watching people pass through. Faces blurred by motion, habits repeated in small, predictable ways, until she saw him, not because he stood out, but because he did not try to. Marcus moved through the frame like someone used to not being seen, steady, calm, placing the delivery down without hesitation, no extra words, no unnecessary movement. And then that moment, brief enough to miss if you blinked, his hand brushing the edge of the console, not dramatic, not deliberate in any obvious way, just a touch, a pause that lasted less than a second. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, replaying it again, then again, not searching for proof, just observing the consistency of it, the timing, the stillness in his posture, the absence of hesitation. He did not look around, did not check if anyone was watching. He simply acted and moved on, as if the outcome did not belong to him. Evelyn sat back slowly, the room quiet except for the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. Something settled into place in her mind, not certainty, not yet, but direction. She closed the video and returned to the system logs, aligning the timestamp side by side, the touch, the change, the correction, all connected by seconds, not minutes, precise, intentional. She exhaled softly, not frustration, not disbelief, just recognition, the kind that comes when a question begins to form its own answer. Downstairs, miles away in a smaller world with softer sounds, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his daughter, a pencil resting between his fingers as he guided her through another math problem, not solving it for her, just asking the right questions, letting her see what she had missed. "Try looking at it a different way," he said quietly. She frowned for a moment. Then her eyes shifted, understanding beginning to surface. "Oh," she said softly, and he smiled, not because she got it right, but because she found it herself. He leaned back slightly, watching her finish the equation with growing confidence. Outside their window, A streetlight flickered once before holding steady. Inside the building across the city, a system continued to run, without flaw, and between those two spaces, the same quiet principle held true. Problems did not always need to announce themselves to be real, and solutions did not need recognition to matter. Back in her office, Evelyn stood, slipping her heels back on, decision forming without urgency. She picked up her tablet and walked toward the door, not calling anyone, not delegating the task. Because some questions could not be answered through reports or teams, some had to be asked directly, and for the first time that day, she was no longer looking for what had changed. She was going to find who had chosen to change it. The next morning did not begin with urgency. It began with clarity, the kind that settles in quietly after a long night of thinking. Evelyn arrived earlier than usual, before most of the staff, before the elevators filled with voices and movement. The lobby still holding that early stillness where everything felt paused just for a moment. She walked through it without hesitation, her pace measured, not rushed, not delayed, just intentional. The security guard nodded. She returned it with a brief glance, her attention already moving ahead. She did not go upstairs, not yet. Instead, she stopped near the same console where the system had been touched, her hand hovering just above the surface without making contact, as if she could feel the difference without seeing it. Nothing looked changed, nothing appeared out of place, but she knew better now. Appearances had nothing to do with truth. She stepped back slightly, eyes shifting toward the entrance as the first wave of employees began to arrive, badges scanned, footsteps echoing softly, patterns repeating. She waited, not impatiently, just present, watching the flow, the same way she had studied the system, not forcing answers, just allowing them to reveal themselves. Time moved in small increments, 5 minutes, 10, the rhythm building. And then she saw him again, not because he demanded attention, but because he moved the same way he had the day before, steady, grounded, unaffected by the environment around him. Marcus stepped inside carrying a smaller delivery this time, his jacket slightly worn. At the edges, his posture straight without effort. He approached the counter, completed the exchange with minimal words, the same quiet efficiency, and turned to leave. But this time, Evelyn moved first. "Excuse me." Her voice was calm, not loud, but it carried. Marcus paused, not startled, just responsive. He turned slightly, meeting her gaze without hesitation, not challenging, not submissive, just direct. "Yes, ma'am," he said, simple, respectful. Evelyn studied him for a brief moment, not looking for confirmation, just observing what was already there. "Did you notice anything unusual about the system yesterday?" she asked, the question precise, not accusatory. Marcus did not answer immediately. Not because he was unsure, but because he was choosing his words. His eyes flicked briefly toward the console, then back to her. "It looked like it was working," he said, tone even. Evelyn held his response in place, not dismissing it, not accepting it fully. "That is not what I asked," she replied softly. Marcus gave a small nod, acknowledging the distinction. A pause followed, not tense, just deliberate. "There was a loop running twice," he said finally. No embellishment, no attempt to impress, just fact. Evelyn's expression did not change, but something behind it sharpened. "And what did you do about it?" she asked. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, the movement subtle, almost unnoticeable. "I adjusted it," he said, the words as simple as the action itself. No explanation, no defense, just truth. A quiet moment settled between them, the kind that carried more weight than raised voices ever could. People passed behind them. Conversations continued, the building coming fully alive. But in that small space near the console, everything slowed. Evelyn's next question came softer, not because it lacked authority, but because it carried something else now, curiosity. "Why?" Marcus looked at her, really looked this time, not at her position, not at her presence, but at the question itself. "Because it would not hold," he said, then added after a brief pause. "Not for long." Evelyn felt the answer settle deeper than expected, not technical, not complex, but complete in a way that did not require more words. She glanced at the console once more, then back at him. "You did not report it," she said. Marcus shook his head lightly. "It was not broken yet," he replied. The same calm tone. the same steady presence. And for the first time since this began, Evelyn did not have a follow-up question ready, because the answer had already shifted something she had built her entire system around. The assumption that value must be visible to exist. She studied him for one last second, then stepped aside, giving him space to leave. Marcus nodded once, not as a gesture of closure, but of acknowledgement, and walked past her, blending back into the movement of the city. Beyond the glass, behind him, Evelyn remained where she was, not looking at the system this time, but at the space he had just occupied, understanding, slowly, that what she had been searching for was never in the code. It was in the decision to act without being asked, without being seen, and without needing anything in return. The rest of the morning continued as if nothing had changed, but for Evelyn, everything had shifted in a way she could not quite explain. Meetings moved forward, reports were delivered, decisions were made. Yet a part of her attention stayed anchored to a simple exchange near the lobby. A man who spoke in short sentences, but left behind something larger than the words themselves. By noon she found herself looking at the system again, not because it needed checking, but because she wanted to understand the difference between what it had been and what it was now. The change was still small on paper, a percentage point here, a reduced delay there, but the structure felt stronger, cleaner, as if someone had removed tension that others had learned to ignore. She walked into the engineering floor without announcing it, the room adjusting instantly as people noticed her presence. Screens straightened, posture corrected, but she did not stop at the center. She moved along the edges, observing quietly, the way Marcus had observed the system, not interrupting, not demanding, just watching. One of the senior engineers approached carefully. "Is there something specific you would like us to review, ma'am?" he asked. Evelyn looked at the screen in front of him, lines of code moving in steady order. "Why was this not seen earlier?" she asked, not accusing, just direct. The engineer hesitated, choosing his answer with care. "It was flagged as low impact, ma'am, something we plan to optimize later." She nodded slightly, not disagreeing, just acknowledging the logic. "And if it had not been adjusted," she continued, "what would have happened?" The engineer glanced at another screen, calculations running quickly in his mind. "It would have increased load over time, not immediately noticeable, but eventually it could have caused delays under heavier traffic." Evelyn let that settle for a moment, not reacting outwardly, but the implication was clear. Something small left unattended becomes something larger, not suddenly, but steadily. She turned away from the screen, her voice quieter now. "So it was not broken," she said, almost to herself. The engineer nodded. "No, ma'am, not yet." She walked a few steps further, her heels soft against the floor. "And that is why it was ignored," she added, not as a question, but as a realization. No one answered. Because the truth did not require confirmation. Later that afternoon, she returned to her office, but she did not sit right away. Instead, she stood by the window, looking out at the city, the movement, the scale, the complexity of everything she had built her life around. For years, she had trusted systems, processes, visibility, the idea that if something mattered, it would show itself clearly, demand attention, justify action. But Marcus had done the opposite. He had seen something before it mattered, acted before it demanded attention, and left without claiming ownership. That kind of thinking did not fit into her structure. It existed outside of it, and yet it had improved it. Her reflection in the glass looked back at her, composed, controlled, but now there was something else behind it, a question that had nothing to do with efficiency or performance, something quieter, more personal. Across the city, Marcus was finishing his shift, stacking empty containers in the back of his truck, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement. He moved with the same steady rhythm, not rushing, not lingering, just completing what needed to be done. One of his co-workers glanced at him. "You always take your time like that," he said casually. Marcus shrugged slightly. "Rushing does not fix things faster," he replied. Simple, not defensive, just true. The co-worker laughed lightly, shaking his head. But Marcus had already moved on, closing the truck door with a soft click. In that moment, in two different parts of the same city, the same principle held steady. One person was beginning to question what she had always believed about control, while another continued, living by something much quieter, the understanding that the right action does not wait for permission, and the most important fixes are often the ones no one realizes were needed. The following day began with the same rhythm, the same predictable flow of movement and expectation. But Evelyn did not step into it the same way. She arrived with intention, not urgency. Her mind already set on something that did not belong to any report or meeting scheduled on her calendar. She walked through the lobby again, slower this time, not because she needed to, but because she was choosing to notice. The console stood where it always had, unchanged, unremarkable to everyone else. Yet, now it held a quiet weight, not as a machine, but as a reminder of something she had almost missed. She continued past it without stopping, moving instead toward the reception desk. "The delivery logs from the past 2 days," she said calmly. The receptionist nodded and began pulling them up without question. Names, times, companies, all listed in neat order. Evelyn scanned them, not rushing, not searching for confirmation, just letting her eyes settle on what felt familiar. Marcus Hale. The name appeared twice, simple, unadorned, no title, no credentials, just a person passing through a system not designed to remember him. She held the name in place for a moment, then closed the file. "If he comes in today, let me know," she added, her tone even, not demanding, just clear. The receptionist nodded again, slightly more curious now, but not asking why. Upstairs, the day moved forward. Meetings filled the hours. Decisions stacked one after another. But Evelyn found herself cutting through them with a new kind of precision, less noise, fewer unnecessary details, as if something in her thinking had been adjusted the same way the system had, removing what did not serve the outcome. By late afternoon, the message came through, quiet, simple, "He is here." Evelyn did not respond immediately. She finished the sentence she was reading, closed the file in front of her, and stood. No rush, no hesitation, just movement. She took the elevator down, alone, the numbers counting softly as she descended, each floor passing like a measured breath. When the doors opened, the lobby was alive again, voices overlapping, footsteps crossing, but her focus did not scatter. It moved straight to him. Marcus stood near the counter, placing a small package down, his posture the same, grounded, present without asking to be seen. He turned slightly as she approached, recognizing her without surprise. "Mr. Hale," she said, using his name this time, not as a formality, but as acknowledgement. Marcus gave a small nod. "Ma'am," he replied, the same calm tone, no shift, no attempt to adjust himself to her presence. And that steadiness, more than anything, held her attention. "Do you have a few minutes?" she asked, not commanding, not suggesting, just offering space. Marcus glanced briefly toward the door, then back at her. "I can make a few," he said. Simple, honest. She gestured toward a quieter corner of the lobby, away from the flow of people, not private, but less crowded. They moved there without ceremony, standing across from each other, not as opposites, but as 2 points in the same moment. Evelyn did not begin immediately. She let the silence settle first, not uncomfortable, just real. "You said it would not hold," she said finally, referring to his words from the day before. Marcus nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She held his gaze, not testing him, just understanding the weight of what she was about to ask. "How did you know?" The question was not about skill, not about knowledge. It was about something deeper. Marcus did not rush to answer. His eyes shifted slightly, not away from her, but inward, as if he was choosing the simplest way to explain something that was not simple. "It was repeating," he said. "Small at first, but patterns do not stay small if you leave them alone." His voice remained steady, quiet, but clear. Evelyn listened without interrupting, each word settling into place, not as information, but as perspective. "And you saw that in a few seconds?" she asked, not doubting, just clarifying. Marcus gave a slight shake of his head. "I have seen it before," he said. "Different systems, same kind of problem." He paused briefly, then added, "Most people wait until it slows everything down. I just do not." The answer was simple, but it carried something that did not belong to training or titles. Evelyn felt it again, that shift, not in the system this time, but in herself, the realization that what she had built was designed to react, to respond, to manage what became visible, while he operated on something quieter, something earlier, something that did not need permission to matter. She nodded slowly, not as agreement, but as recognition, and in that moment, the space between them was no longer defined by position or status, but by understanding, one that had only just begun to take shape. The noise of the lobby returned around them, conversations rising and falling, footsteps crossing in quiet patterns, but neither of them moved right away, the space between them holding something that did not need to be filled. Evelyn glanced briefly toward the flow of people, then back at Marcus, her expression composed but no longer distant. "You do not work here," she said, not as a question, just stating what was already clear. Marcus shook his head slightly. "No, ma'am," he replied. Simple. She nodded once, absorbing that, then continued. "And yet you understood a part of the system my own team overlooked." Marcus did not react to the implication, did not take it as praise or challenge. He just stood there, steady. "It is not about understanding everything," he said after a moment. "Just noticing what does not feel right." Evelyn let that settle, the simplicity of it contrasting with the complexity she was used to managing. "Most people would not act on that," she said, her voice quieter now, less about authority, more about curiosity. Marcus gave a small shrug. "Most people have a reason not to," he answered, then added, "I did not." The answer was not defensive, not proud, just honest. Evelyn looked at him for a longer moment this time, not analyzing, not measuring, just seeing. "What if you were wrong?" she asked, not to challenge him, but to understand the boundary he worked within. Marcus did not hesitate. "Then I would have learned something before it mattered," he said, the words landing with a quiet certainty that did not need reinforcement. Evelyn exhaled softly, a small shift in posture, as if something inside her had loosened. "You made a decision without permission," she said, almost to herself. Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am." There was no apology in it, no hesitation, just acknowledgement. Another pause followed, but this one felt different, less about searching for answers and more about recognizing what had already been said. Evelyn glanced once more toward the console, then back to Marcus. "Do you always do that?" she asked, not specifying what that meant, but both of them understood. Marcus looked down briefly, not avoiding, just considering. "When it matters," he said, and that was all. No explanation, no expansion, just a line that carried its own weight. Evelyn felt something shift again, deeper this time, not in her understanding of systems, but in her understanding of value. For years she had built layers of approval, processes designed to prevent mistakes, structures that ensured control, and yet, here stood someone who operated outside of all of it, and still made the right choice at the right time, not by authority, but by awareness. She straightened slightly, decision forming not out of impulse, but out of clarity. "I want you to come upstairs," she said, the words direct but not forceful. Marcus looked at her, not surprised, not resistant, just measuring the request. "Why?" he asked, not challenging her, just asking for purpose. Evelyn held his gaze, not offended by the question, but respecting it. "Because I want you to show me what you see," she replied, not as a command, but as an invitation. Marcus was quiet for a moment, the noise of the lobby moving around them without interruption. He glanced toward the door again, the outside world waiting, responsibilities that did not pause for opportunity, then back at her. "I have another delivery in 20 minutes, he said, matter of fact. Evelyn nodded, not pushing, not negotiating, just acknowledging the reality of his time. "Then come back after," she said, her tone calm. Certain. Marcus considered it for a brief second, then gave a small nod. "All right," he said. Simple. The agreement made without ceremony, without conditions, just mutual understanding. Evelyn stepped aside once more, giving him space to leave. But this time the movement carried something different, not just respect, but recognition. Marcus walked toward the door, the same steady pace, the same quiet presence. But now the distance between them was no longer defined by who belonged where. It had been replaced by something else, something that did not fit into titles or systems. Something built in a moment where one person chose to see, and another chose to listen. He came back just as the evening lights softened the edges of the city, not late, not early, just exactly when he said he would. Marcus stepped through the glass doors with the same quiet presence. No announcement, no shift in posture, as if returning to a place he had never intended to stay. Evelyn was already waiting near the elevators, not seated, not distracted, just present. She gave a small nod when she saw him. And this time there was no need for words to begin. They stepped into the elevator together, the doors closing with a soft sound that seemed to separate this moment from everything below. The ride up was silent, not uncomfortable, just steady, numbers rising one by one. When the doors opened, the floor was quieter, more controlled, the kind of space where every detail had been considered, every movement measured. Marcus followed her without hesitation, not looking around for approval, not trying to belong, just observing. They entered her office, the city stretching wide beyond the glass, but neither of them turned to it. Evelyn moved to her console, bringing up the system in its current state. Clean, efficient, stable. Show me, she said, the same word she had used with her team. But this time the tone carried something different, not a test, not a challenge, but trust placed carefully in the open. Marcus stepped forward, not rushing, his eyes moving across the screen with quiet focus. He did not touch anything immediately. He just looked, the same way he had in the lobby, the same way he had at the kitchen table with his daughter, patient, attentive, present. Seconds passed, then a minute. Evelyn did not interrupt, did not fill the silence, because she understood now that this part mattered. Finally Marcus reached out, his fingers moving lightly across the interface, not rewriting, not overriding, just tracing. It is cleaner now, he said, simple, acknowledging the change. Then he paused again, his gaze narrowing slightly, not in confusion, but in recognition. But there, he added quietly, pointing to a section deeper in the structure. Evelyn leaned in just a fraction, following his indication. What is it? She asked. Marcus did not answer right away, his eyes staying on the pattern. It is small, he said, and it will not show up today. He moved one step closer, adjusting a single parameter, not enough to trigger alerts, not enough to draw attention, just enough to redirect a path that would have slowly created pressure over time. Then he stepped back, hands lowering, no expectation, no explanation, just done. Evelyn watched the screen, the change barely visible, but she felt it, not in the numbers, but in the way he approached it, not reacting, not waiting, just seeing what was not yet visible and choosing to act. She looked at him, really looked this time, not as a CEO evaluating performance, but as a person recognizing something she had overlooked for years. You saw that already, she said softly. Marcus nodded once. It was there, he replied, as if that was enough reason. The room grew quiet again, but this time it carried something else, not uncertainty, not tension, but clarity. Evelyn turned back to the screen, then slowly closed it, not because the system no longer mattered, but because she understood it differently now. She faced him again, her voice steady, but no longer distant. I built this company on control, she said, on making sure nothing goes unnoticed. She paused, just for a second, then added, but you noticed what did not exist yet. Marcus did not respond, not because he disagreed, but because he did not need to explain himself. Evelyn let out a quiet breath, something releasing that had been held for a long time. Stay, she said, not as an order, not as a transaction, just a single word offered with meaning. Marcus looked at her, not weighing the opportunity, not calculating the benefit, just considering the moment. Then he gave a small shake of his head, not rejecting, just redirecting. I have to pick up my daughter, he said, simple, grounded, real. Evelyn held his answer for a moment, then nodded slowly, understanding settling without resistance. Of course, she said, and stepped aside, the same way she had before. But this time there was no distance left between what she saw and what she understood. Marcus turned and walked toward the door, the same steady pace, the same quiet presence, and when he left, the room did not feel empty. It felt changed, not because of what had been fixed, but because of what had been revealed. Evelyn stood there for a long moment, looking at nothing in particular, then finally toward the city beyond the glass, the lights beginning to come alive one by one, systems everywhere, running, functioning, unseen. And for the first time in years, she was not thinking about how to control them. She was thinking about how to see them earlier, to understand them before they asked to be understood. And somewhere between that thought and the silence that followed, something simple settled into place. He did not raise his voice. He did not claim credit. He did not ask for anything. He simply saw what others missed